Good morning. Excuse me. My name is Victoria McDonald, and I'm on the Worship Associate team. Today, I'm assisting Annette Lovell, who will lead today's virtual service. We welcome all to join us. Please add any joys and concerns in the chat box if you have not done so already, and a candle will be lit for you. Donations are gratefully accepted. Our expenses are ongoing every day, every month, and the building maintenance expenses continue, etc., etc. Our UUCIF website has a donation box in the upper right corner, or you can send a check through the mail to Box 50376, Idaho Falls 83405. There will not be a coffee hour after the service, but please stay with us for our annual meeting, which is especially crucial in this time. A link to the annual meeting is in the email titled Financial Handout, and there's also a link for the annual meeting. Plus, we have been sent, I would say 4 or 5 days ago, a voting ID that you will need so you can vote. Moving into the Peace Bowl part of the service. Before I ring the Peace Bowl, I will offer a short mantra. It is hymn 1009, excuse me, that many of you know. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Jessica Kuipers will now play our prelude.
Man must have his mate, that no one hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. A woman needs a man, and a man must have his mate that no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
Please join me in reading the covenant. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our chalice lighting is accompanied by the following words written by Deborah Burrell. Please light your own candle at home if you are able. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame today consume our regrets from the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light a path of peace and healing. Blessed be. Okay, now we have hymn 124, Be That Guide. No.
She thought she was going to get me out of this. Good morning, everyone. Our call to worship this morning is from Philip Hewitt. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness. By many cares and preoccupations, by diverse and selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves. Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all. We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us. We would hold fast to all of the good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the faults. We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy. Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day, without hatred, violence, and injustice. Let us nurture the growth in our own lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of men and women, the rays of whose lamps illumine our way. In this spirit we gather. In this spirit we pray. And now we'll have our opening hymn, page 124, Be That Guide.
Be that guide whom love sustains, rise above the daily strife, lift on high the good you find, help to heal the hurts of life. Be that
Lily's Purple Plastic Purse by Kevin Hanks. Lily loved school. I love school. She loved the pointy pencils. She loved the squeaky chalk. And she loved the way her boots went clickety-clickety-click down the long, shiny hallways. Lily loved the privacy of her own desk. She loved the fish sticks and chocolate milk every Friday in the lunchroom. And most of all, she loved her teacher, Mr. Slinger. Mr. Slinger was sharp as a tack. He wore artistic shirts. He wore glasses on a chain around his neck. And he wore a different colored tie for every day of the week. Wow, said Lily. That was just about all she could say. Wow. Instead of greetings, students, or good morning, pupils, Mr. Slinger winked and said, howdy. He thought that desks and rows were old-fashioned and boring. Do you rodents think you can handle a semicircle? And he always provided the most tasty snacks, things that were curly and crunchy and cheesy. I want to be a teacher when I grow up, said Lily. Me too, said her friends Chester and Wilson and Victor. At home, Lily pretended to be Mr. Slinger. I am the teacher, she told her baby brother Julius. Listen up. Lily even wanted her own set of deluxe picture encyclopedias. What's with Lily? Asked her mother. I thought she wanted to be a surgeon or an ambulance driver or a diva, said her father. It must be because of her new teacher, Mr. Slinger, said her mother. Wow, said her father. That was just about all he could say. Wow. Whenever the students had free time, they were permitted to go to the light bulb lab in the back of the classroom. They expressed their ideas creatively through drawing and writing. Lily went often. She had a lot of ideas. She drew pictures of Mr. Slinger, and she wrote stories about him, too. During sharing time, Lily showed her creations to the entire class. Wow, said Mr. Slinger. That was just about all he could say. Wow. Big, friendly Mr. Nice Man Teacher. By me, Lily. And at the very last second, Mr. Slinger saved the cold, starving elderly. When Mr. Slinger had bus duty, Lily stood in line even though she didn't ride the bus. Lily raised her hand more than anyone else in class, even if she didn't know the answer. And she volunteered to stay after school to clap erasers. I want to be a teacher when I grow up, said Lily. Excellent choice, said Mr. Slinger. One Monday morning, Lily came to school especially happy. She had gone shopping with her Grammy over the weekend. Lily had a new pair of movie star sunglasses, complete with glittery diamonds and a chain like Mr. Slinger's. She had 3 shiny quarters. And best of all, she had a brand new purple plastic purse that played a jaunty tune when it was opened. Lily wanted to show everyone. Not now, said Mr. Slinger. Listen to our story. Lily had a hard time listening. Lily really wanted to show everyone. Not now, said Mr. Slinger. Let's be considerate of our classmates. Lily had a hard time being considerate. Lily really wanted to show everyone. Not now, said Mr. Slinger. Wait until recess or sharing time. But Lily could not wait. The glasses were so glittery, the quarters were so shiny, and the purse played such nice music, not to mention how excellent it was for storing school supplies. Look, Lily whispered fiercely. Look, everyone, look what I've got. Everyone looked, including Mr. Slinger. He was not amused. I'll just keep your things at my desk until the end of the day, said Mr. Slinger. They'll be safe there, and then you can take them home. Lily's stomach lurched. She felt like crying. Her glasses were gone. Her quarters were gone. Her purple plastic purse was gone. Lily longed for her purse all morning. She was even too sad to eat the snack Mr. Slinger served before recess. That afternoon, Lily went to the light bulb lab. She was still very sad. She thought and she thought and she thought. And then she became angry. She thought and she thought and she thought some more. And then she became furious. She thought and she thought and she thought a bit longer. And then she drew a picture of Mr. Slinger. Big, fat, mean Mr. Stealing teacher. Claus. Thief. Wanted by FBI. P.S. I do not want to be a teacher when I grow up. Right before the last bell rang, Lily sneaked the drawing right into Mr. Slinger's book bag. When all the students were buttoned and zipped and snapped and tied and ready to go home, Mr. Slinger strolled over to Lily and gave her purple plastic purse back. It's a beautiful purse, said Mr. Slinger. Your quarters are nice and jingly, and those glasses are absolutely fabulous. You may bring them back to school as long as you don't disturb the rest of the class. I do not want to be a teacher when I grow up, Lily said as she marched out of the classroom. On the way home, Lily opened her purse. Her glasses and quarters were inside, and so was a note from Mr. Slinger. It said, "Today was a difficult day. Tomorrow will be better." There was also a small bag of tasty snacks at the bottom of the purse. Lily's stomach lurched. She felt like crying. She felt simply awful. Lily ran all the way home and told her mother and father everything. Instead of watching her favorite cartoons, Lily decided to sit in the uncooperative chair. I'll stay here a million years for Mr. Slinger. Why does everything always happen to me? 1051, 1052, 1099. That night, Lily drew a new picture of Mr. Slinger and wrote a story about him, too. Lily was really, really sorry, so everyone forgave her, even her parents, even her stinky baby brother, even her especially incredible teacher. And then the sun shined its smiley face down on everyone and everything, even the bugs and worms. The end. Listen up. I forgive everyone. Kind, good, nice, could be principal. I am really, 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 really sorry. Lily's mother wrote a note, and Lily's father baked some tasty snacks for Lily to take to school the next day. I think Mr. Slinger will understand, said Lily's mother. I know he will, said Lily's father. How could he resist my no-frills cheese balls? The next morning, Lily got to school early. These are for you, Lily said to Mr. Slinger, because I'm really, 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 really sorry. Mr. Slinger read the story, and he looked at the picture, and he read the note, and he sampled the snacks. Wow, said Mr. Slinger. That was just about all he could say. Wow. What do you think we should do with this? Asked Mr. Slinger. Could we just throw it away? Asked Lily. Excellent idea, said Mr. Slinger. During sharing time, Lily demonstrated the many uses and unique qualities of her purple plastic purse, her shiny quarters, and her glittery movie star sunglasses. It's like having an extra pocket with a radio inside. 3 quarters are even better than $1 because they make noise. Glamorous protections from harmful rays. Then she did a little performance using them as props. It's called interpretive dance, said Lily. Mr. Slinger joined in. Wow, said the entire class. That was just about all they could say. Wow. Throughout the rest of the day, Lily's purse and quarters and sunglasses were tucked safely inside her desk. She peeked at them often, but did not disturb a soul. Right before the last bell rang, Mr. Slinger served Lily's snacks, to everyone's delight. What do you want to be when you grow up? Asked Mr. Slinger. A teacher! Everyone responded. Lily's response was the loudest. Excellent choice, said Mr. Slinger. As the pupils filed out of the classroom, Lily held her purple plastic purse close to her heart. Mr. Slinger was right. It had been a better day. Lily ran and skipped and hopped and flew all the way home. She was so happy. And she really did want to be a teacher when she grew up. That is, when she didn't want to be a dancer or a surgeon or an ambulance driver or a diva or a pilot or a hairdresser or a scuba diver. Ready for takeoff. The end.
Joys and concerns. I have a few joys of my own that I will read, and then Daniel will read 2 others that are in the chat box. My first joy is for Jessica Kuipers and her musicianship. We are so thankful to have her. The second one, the volunteers who contribute to keeping this church alive. Some have done so for a long time, and others of us are new, but we are all important. My final joy is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their administration now have the opportunity to chart the next 4 years of our nation's present and future.
Okay, there are two more in the chat. One from Amanda Logan, a joy. She is thankful for the peaceful transition of power and beautiful ceremony we had this past week after all was said and done. And I have a sorrow from Ron Goyne. His friend Richard Cox died last Tuesday from COVID-19. And that's it.
And we have one more candle to be lit for those joys and concerns that have not been expressed but remain in our hearts.
In light of the past few years, and especially the past 2 months since our election, we seem to become more and more fractured in our nation and in our personal relationships. I thought the service topic of forgiveness was not just timely, but necessary. The Rev Elizabeth Selle Jones was an interim minister for our church back in 2004 and 2005 while we were still a fellowship. She shared this sermon in October of 2004, and with a few minor adjustments, I wanted to share her thoughts again today. Forgiveness is a human act, a human quality that raises many questions, moral and ethical questions, questions of limits. Forgiveness, like nonviolence, is a personal goal, a standard for daily living which we should strive for. So I like to think a lot about forgiveness. There are often angers, frustrations, and hurts in a congregation. These hurts and angers are sometimes caused by something the minister did or didn't do, or in some cases what other congregants did or didn't do. There are probably simmering hurts and angers in your personal lives or in your social media lives. Forgiveness is a human endeavor we need to talk about often. Forgiveness raises a lot of questions, not only in our personal lives, but in the political world as well. For example, are there limits to forgiveness? What about the people that commit atrocities on a global scale, like Adolf Hitler, or Saddam Hussein, or Pol Pot? How about those we think of as ordinary people who rape, abuse, torture, and kill? Should they ever be forgiven? And what would that mean? What would it be like to live in a society in which accountability and forgiveness, instead of retribution and vengeance, were the law of the land and the measure of our humanity? What would that world look like? Would there be anarchy and chaos? Would there be universal violence, more than already exists? Chaos, violence, and anarchy were what many predicted when 100 years ago, the Universalist preached universal salvation. That's the belief that God would and does forgive every sin and all are saved, that there is no hell. But chaos did not reign. So maybe it's time to add the belief in the practice of forgiveness to our personal as well as our religious lives. But can we give up vengeance, retribution, anger, hate, and pettiness? I believe that part of our problem with embracing forgiveness comes from that Old Testament image of God, where he is portrayed as this vengeful, angry father figure punishing his sinning children. It's that eye for an eye, that has become the rule of life for many people. However, what the practice of an eye for an eye leads to or results in is not peace or a comforted people, but a world where everyone is blind. In the worldview of retribution, the only honorable way to respond to an act of violence, a threat, or a wrong done to you or a member of your family is revenge. Hatred, anger, resentment, and the desire and justification to pay back or exact revenge seems to be taken as part of our human nature and has now become an accepted and honorable part of our culture. But there is also a parallel, an almost forgotten tradition that calls us instead to forgiveness. This tradition that is strongly connected to the teachings of Jesus is also a part of other religious traditions, including Islam and Buddhism. Jesus encouraged the practice of forgiveness. Compassion and forgiveness were the central messages of his teachings. Even though our secular culture generally views the principles of forgiveness as laughable and impractical, are they? Really? Are vengeance and retribution such a success? Have they brought us peace and prosperity? Have they eased our grief and soothed our anger? Has it made the world a safer and saner place? The attraction of revenge and violence is easy to see. We can vent our hatred. We can hurt those who hurt us, satisfy our anger and our grief. We can show the world that we're not wimps. To respond with vengeance and overwhelming power instead of forgiveness or peacemaking is the way to restore our honor and our place in the world community, right? But our dedication to revenge and punishment takes a very high toll in our material resources, suffering, and human lives. It devastates individual lives and communities. Read the papers and social media. Look around you. Look inside you. Would you, could you forgive, heal your hurts, and restore good relations in the world community or closer to home with someone who has hurt or abused you? Is it not a better practice than revenge or even getting even in some way? Better than holding a grudge? How many people have you cut out of your lives in the past 4 years just because they see politics different from you? In his book, Forgive and Forget, Louis Schmeeds speaks to many of these questions and quandaries about forgiveness. He says, quote, "Forgive is love's toughest work and love's biggest risk. If you twist it into something it was never meant to be, it can make you a doormat or an insufferable manipulator. Forgiveness seems almost unnatural. Our sense of fairness tells us people should pay for the wrongs they do. But forgiving is love's power to break nature's rule." Unquote. He asked these good questions. What do I do when I forgive someone who has done me wrong? Who is forgiven or who is forgivable? Have some people gone beyond the forgiveness zone? How do I do it? Why should I even try? Is there a payoff? Is it fair? The idea of forgiveness raises a week's full of questions because forgiveness is a huge issue. So for today's service, we're going to narrow the field. Today, we are not going to talk about forgiving corporations, systems, active nature, or even God, though these are all well worth pondering. This morning, we are talking about forgiving other human beings, ordinary people, it is my experience that the people who can hurt me the most and the deepest are those that I share a relationship with. In churches and religious communities, sometimes it's the minister who hurts our feelings or causes us to be angry. It could also be a congregant or someone who is a friend or we thought was a friend who wounds us verbally in some way. Of course, strangers, casual acquaintances, or even politicians hurt and anger us as well. People can disappoint us by their disloyalty or what seems like their insensitivity to our feelings. Breaking a promise can hurt deeply, and feeling betrayed is a very deep wound. So can we bring ourselves to forgive the person who has hurt us in this way? When someone wounds, offends, or disappoints, even in a small, insignificant way, like a sharp word, maybe spoken in anger, I know I feel hurt and sometimes angry. I carry that hurt and anger around with me for a while, and then I realize, it wasn't important, it's okay, and I try to silently forgive the person and just move on. Well, nothing further needs to be done. But if that hurt is not dealt with, and it's deep enough, and you hold on to it, it can turn into hate or permanent anger, which are even harder emotions to deal with. So let's talk about forgetting in the process of forgiving. Most small incidences are best forgotten at the same time they are forgiven. But in the case of larger wounds or transgressions, the act needs to be remembered and still forgiven. The transgressor needs to be held accountable and still forgiven. Forgetting does not heal the wound. Only forgiving will do that. Hurts, angers, grudges, and hatreds undealt with can make us physically sick. In real life, people can get sick, sometimes bent over from the weight of their grudges and hurts, and forgiving is the only sure cure. Smead once again says in his book, hate can be fatal when we let it grow to enormous size inside of us. The best people can get their bellies full of it. And it is just as real, whether it involves a nasty little scene between friends or a question of international immorality. Sometimes your hate or your anger only nibbles at the edges of your heart. It does not always burn out the lining of your soul, but whether your hate or anger is a carcinoma growing hell-bent for death inside your soul, or only a pesky little heartburn, it will hurt you if you do not use the right remedy. Your healing may take heroic surgery of that soul. Then again, you may get by with a quick cauterization. But eventually, unchecked, hate or anger will do you in. But such hate can be healed. As with any change that might be made in our lives, if we are going to learn to forgive, first we must want to forgive. That does not mean finding excuses for the person's actions by waving it off as if the hurt is not there. Forgiveness begins with recognition that I need to forgive so that I can get on with my own life. And to do that, gradually, we must get a new insight about the person who has wounded us or is wounding us. And this is far from easy. One of the reasons we bury the hurt instead of dealing with it is because it is very painful to recognize the reality of hurt. Forgiving does not mean that all the terrible, petty, or painful things in the past are going to be transformed like straw into gold, like in a fairy tale. They are going to remain as ugly as they ever were. But you can choose to see them in a different way. You need to have new insight. You have to see the person who hurt you with new eyes. You or I, not the other person, has to be transformed. We have to see the object of our anger, of our hurt and anger, in a different way. To see that person as a human being like ourselves, with needs and shortcomings. One who can make mistakes, get tired, frustrated, and be fearful. Then we can see this person as more than just the hurtful act itself. But this often takes time. And I know that whenever even a teeny part of me has the power to wish that person well, then the forgiveness process has begun. This can and must happen even when, and even though, I may not tolerate or see as acceptable in any way what that person did. Accept the person, not the act. This is love's toughest work, love's biggest risk. Still, the hate needs to be transformed. Forgiveness is a severe test. It calls us every day to actually live out our daily lives with our Unitarian Universalist principles that affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, compassion in human relationships, and acceptance of one another. Sometimes a covenant nudges us to a higher vision. And for some of us, it may call for a tough, personal transformation. It's some very hard work. So remember that forgiving is not for the other person, the transgressor. Forgiving is for the victim. It's for those of us that have been hurt, you and me. We're the ones that feel hate or anger. Sometimes the hardest part is not the forgiving, but just giving up that anger. It feels so self-satisfying and righteous to be angry sometimes. Sadly, we can become addicted to the idea of being the victim. We can become hooked on the pain so that it's hard to give it up. But we all need to be forgiven. More importantly, we need to forgive each other. Each of us has at some time or another hurt someone else, maybe even someone we loved and trusted, and they loved and trusted us. Few of us could cast the first stone, as the biblical phrase goes, if it meant that we had never hurt anyone ourselves. We are both the victim and the victimizer, the abuser and the abused, which in itself is an important reason to forgive. The most important point is that forgiving one another is vital to our health. It is essential to our sense of well-being and joy. It is necessary if we are going to be fully alive and whole, and essential for the building of a healthy community, a flourishing community. But forgiving deep hurts is one of the most difficult things we can do. And some of us find it almost impossible to do, no matter how hard we try. We seem not to be able to forgive. But not forgiving and carrying the hate or the hurt is like drinking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. Louis Schmid writes these words of encouragement. If you are trying to forgive, even if you forgive today and hate tomorrow and have to forgive the day after, you are a forgiver. Most of us are amateurs at forgiving. So what? When it comes to forgiving, nobody is an expert. We're all beginners. So starting a new year, starting with a new federal administration, but actually any time is the right time for forgiveness, a time for reaching for wholeness and health. It is a time for forgiving past hurts, forgiving mistakes and errors that we made, as well as forgiving others who fell short of our expectations or hurt us in some way. It is a good time to make another attempt at healing wounds by our forgiveness. In that way, we can be ready to make a whole new start in living, renewing and re-energizing. When we do so, we will experience the incredible power of forgiveness. And now our closing hymn is page 38, Winds Be Still.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility. Birds fly high, lift our gaze toward distant view, help us to sense life's mystery. Fly high and far and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Light shining, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become a full symphony.
Our closing words today were written by an African poet by the name of Tafadwa Magari. He told a story about a teacher that had each student bring a clear plastic bag and a sack of potatoes to class. For every person we'd refused to forgive in our lives, we were told to choose a potato, write the name and the date on it, and put it in the plastic sack. Some of our bags, as you can imagine, were quite heavy. We were then told to carry this bag with us everywhere we went for 1 week, putting it beside our bed at night, on our car seat while we were driving, next to our desk at work. The hassle of lugging this around with us made it clear what a weight we were carrying spiritually and how we had to pay attention to it all the time, to not forget and keep leaving it in embarrassing places. Well, naturally, the condition of the potatoes deteriorated to a nasty slime, and this was also a great metaphor for the price we pay for keeping our pain and heavy negativity. Too often we think of forgiveness as a gift that we give to others. And while that's true, it's clear it is also a gift we give to ourselves. So the next time you decide you can't forgive somebody, ask yourself, isn't my bag heavy enough?
And now I'll extinguish the chalice after reading our words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.